Somehow, Yi Qiao made her way back to her room, crawled into bed, but couldn't sleep. Normally, she would have been out like a light, but tonight? Her mind was racing. How had things spiraled this far? She knew being a direct disciple wasn't going to be easy. Extra lessons, non-stop training, and even worse, the inner sect elder would personally train her reflexes, which meant getting hit during practice every single day. She remembered how she had once tried to comfort someone in this exact situation, but now it was her turn to face the hardship. I can't even think about it, or I'll start crying. The next day, the entire outer sect was buzzing with the news of Yi Qiao becoming a direct disciple. Where there are people, there's drama, especially when it concerns personal interests. Some grumbled, she wasn't even as skilled as me before. Some people insisted that Yi Qiao must have pulled some strings to get in. She's not talented, her assessment scores were awful, and if they were going to pick a direct disciple, it should have been from the inner sect, right? Someone said, stirring up trouble. Yeah, why not senior sister Ning? She's way more qualified. They were talking about Ning Qing, a top inner sect disciple from the Changming sect. Meanwhile, Yi Qiao, now the center of attention and controversy, was in her room, letting her only friend from the outer sect, Du Chun, help her pack. Seeing her lackluster expression, Du Chun teased, "Well, look at you. Quietly leveling up to become a direct disciple, huh?" Hearing the words direct disciple only made Yi Qiao feel even more helpless. No one understood how she was really feeling. Usually so carefree and energetic, today she was just totally deflated. Du Chun went ahead and pinched her cheeks, saying, "Come on, smile a little. What's with the long face?" But seeing the awkward, miserable grin Yi Qiao forced out, he quickly backed off. "Okay, forget it. Just don't smile," he laughed. Yi Qiao then handed him a stack of magical talismans and told him to stick them by his bed. "You can cultivate while lying down with these." "Wait, really?" Du Chun looked skeptical. "Are you serious? You can actually cultivate by just lying down?" Yi Qiao, feeling a bit better, threw her bag over her shoulder and said, "Try it and see for yourself." After saying goodbye, she left the room. Just as she opened the door, she heard a sharp swish. She looked up to find a sword pointed directly at her face. Standing there was Ning Qing, the inner sect disciple everyone had been talking about. Glaring at Yi Qiao, she demanded, "What makes you think you deserve to be a direct disciple? Is it just because of your relationship with senior brother Mu?" Ning Qing's voice grew harsher as she spoke, her anger escalating. "You, a useless waste with second-rate spiritual roots, think you deserve to move to the main peak and train alongside senior brother Ming Xian?" Yi Qiao didn't pay any attention to the aggressive senior sister standing before her. She pushed the sword away gently and said, "Can we just talk this out? It's against sect rules to draw your sword without reason." With a deep sigh, she added wistfully, "Nobody knows how much I envy you." Ning Qing was caught off guard by her words, and then immediately asked, annoyed, "Envy me? For what? Are you jealous that I didn't end up as a direct disciple or something?" But Yi Qiao, looking utterly defeated, just shook her head. "No, I envy all those people who don't have to work hard at all." Ning Qing thought Yi Qiao was out of her mind. What's wrong with her, she wondered. Neither of them noticed that someone had suddenly appeared behind them. Zhu Xingyun, a direct disciple of the Changming sect. He didn't even look their way. He just stared intently at the flower in his hand and, without much emotion, said 2 words. "Let's go." Both Yi Qiao and Ning Qing jumped in surprise and turned to look at Zhu Xingyun, having no idea when he had arrived. Yi Qiao stepped forward obediently, calling out sweetly, "Senior brother." She noticed that his attention was completely absorbed by the flower. She'd already met Mingxian and Mu Chongxi, but this was her first time seeing Zhu Xingyun. Remembering his character from the novel, a brooding, almost melancholic guy who was always on the brink of wanting to end it all, Yi Qiao got lost in her thoughts. In the story, it was the female protagonist who ended up saving him, and he eventually became a loyal member of her harem. Caught up in these thoughts, Yi Qiao didn't notice that a strand of her hair had popped up awkwardly. Ju Xingyun, spotting the rebellious strand, suddenly had the urge to smooth it down. But when the strand kept bouncing back, he could barely control his twitching fingers. Unable to hold back anymore, Ju Xingyun reached out and pressed down the unruly lock of hair. Yi Qiao stared at him in confusion. It was their first time meeting, after all. But Ju Xingyun couldn't explain what was going on. He was too busy fighting with that defiant strand of hair. The moment he let go, it sprang right back up again. Suppressing his irritation, he tried smoothing it down once more. And once more, it bounced back. Ju Xingyun's patience finally snapped as he stared at that single stubborn strand, standing tall like it owned the place. Yi Qiao couldn't help but think senior brother must have OCD, given how fixated he was on trying to smooth down her hair. Desperate to get away from the annoying strand that was driving him crazy, Ju Xingyun grabbed Yi Qiao and flew straight to the main peak at top speed. When they arrived, he unceremoniously handed her over to Shui Yu and took off without a word. Watching him hurry away, Shui Yu felt like something about senior brother was off. But before he could figure it out, he heard the sounds of Yi Qiao throwing up. He immediately asked if Yi Qiao was okay, worried. Meanwhile, Yi Qiao was silently cursing Ju Xingyun for flying way too fast. What she didn't know was that Ju Xingyun was holding back an intense urge. He really wanted to chop off that stubborn strand of hair with his sword. Seeing Yi Qiao's pale face, Shui Yu quickly started taking care of his little junior sister. He had been looking forward to the new addition bringing some excitement to the sect. After some rest, Yi Qiao finally felt better. Curious, she turned to Shui Yu and asked, "Hey, do we have some kind of induction ceremony for new disciples?" Shui Yu paused slightly, then replied honestly, "Nope, we don't have any induction ceremonies. At least, none of the four of us did." Yi Qiao recalled how, in the original novel, the female protagonist, Yin Qiu, had been welcomed as a direct disciple with a grand ceremony that attracted well-wishers from all over. Why was the Changming sect's process so low-key? She voiced her confusion. Why do other sects have such grand ceremonies, but not us? Shui Yu awkwardly coughed and finally said, "Maybe we're just low on funds." When she heard Shui Yu's blunt response, Yi Qiao quickly translated it in her mind to, "We're poor, plain and simple." In the cultivation world, sects with the most money are usually the ones with more specialized cultivators or lucrative professions. But Changming sect has very few specialists, so naturally, they don't have as much cash as other sects. Seeing his junior sister's disappointed expression, Shui Yu quickly changed the subject, saying that they only had 2 classes to attend, the mind arts class and the training class. Noticing that Yi Qiao still looked pretty down, Shui Yu added that both classes would be taught by the elders. If she had any questions, she could ask them or come to him for help. Wait. This is starting to sound like high school all over again, thought Yi Qiao, feeling like she was on the verge of breaking down. What kind of bad luck did she have? She'd barely escaped the prison of high school a few years ago, only to end up in another prison after crossing over to this world. Just then, a dense surge of spiritual energy rushed towards her, completely grabbing her attention. Now she understood why the cultivation of direct disciples far surpassed that of regular ones. It was thanks to this insane amount of spiritual energy. Seeing Yi Qiao's surprise at the chaotic spiritual energy, Shui Yu handed her a bottle containing stabilizing pills, telling her to take one. "It'll help you feel much better." Yi Qiao took the bottle with both hands and suddenly remembered reading about these pills in the original novel. They could stabilize spiritual energy, making it easier for someone with an unstable foundation to strengthen their cultivation rapidly. No matter how good a pill is, it's only useful once it's in your belly, right? With that thought, she swallowed one without hesitation. According to the novel, this type of pill was so precious that even the Changming sect's top disciples could only produce 3 batches within 3 years, and all of it was gifted to the female lead. Yi Qiao never thought she'd get a share. She genuinely thanked Shui Yu for it. When Shui Yu heard Yi Qiao's compliment about how kind he was, he felt satisfied. Junior sister's so sweet, not only cute but also polite, unlike that greedy Mu Chongxi, who only knows how to ask for things. Totally different. Suddenly, a shrill scream echoed from the sky, and Yi Qiao turned toward it, only catching a glimpse of a blur racing past. Wow, that bird person's fast, she thought, just before hearing a loud thud as something heavy crashed to the ground. It startled her so much she jumped. Startled, Yi Qiao turned to see the figure struggling to get up. Only then did she realize it was none other than her youngest senior brother, Mu Chongxi. After standing up, Mu Chongxi seemed embarrassed, so he angrily pointed at his archenemy, second senior brother Ming Xian, and yelled, "Ming Xian! You wanna fight?" Ming Xian's smile vanished instantly, and he pulled out some talismans from his sleeve. "Fight? Sure, like I'm scared of you." Watching the two of them look like they were ready to kill each other, Yi Qiao thought, geez, these two really do hate each other. I wonder if they're secretly hoping to stab each other one day. Curious, she turned to third senior brother and asked, are they always like this? Shui Yu, looking unfazed, replied, yep. Just let them finish fighting, nothing to worry about. He really doesn't get it, thought Yi Qiao, eyes lighting up with excitement. Really? They're going to fight? Oh my gosh, this is gonna be fun. I've never seen people fight before, she exclaimed, practically vibrating with energy. Shui Yu glanced at his little junior sister, feeling like something was off. Why did he get the sense she was a bit too excited? Yi Qiao suddenly realized she wasn't hiding her excitement well, so she quickly put on a tragic expression and repeated, oh no, this is so sad. Seriously? Shui Yu was speechless. Don't think I can't tell you're itching to see them fight just because you changed your expression. He immediately stepped in to separate the two before they started throwing punches. All right, enough. Stop arguing and get inside the training hall. Elder Du and Yu will be here any minute. Inside the training hall, a few disciples were already practicing their swordsmanship. Elder Du and Yu, the man in charge of their training, was a burly guy with a scruffy beard. He walked over and gave Yi Qiao a once-over. You're the new one, kid? Yi Qiao hadn't even gotten a chance to reply when she suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood and collapsed onto the ground. Everyone, including Elder Du and Yu, was stunned. Even Mu Chongxi, who usually liked to stir up trouble, mumbled under his breath, Elder, she's not me. You've been beating me up for years now. She's only been here a day. Go easy on her. Yi Qiao shot Mu Chongxi a grateful look, thinking, at least someone's looking out for me. Elder Du and Yu awkwardly laughed it off, of course, I know what I'm doing. He handed Yi Qiao a booklet titled Wind Step Manual. This will help you increase your speed. All the direct disciples have a copy. Your senior brothers have already mastered it, so you better find some time to practice. Yi Qiao hugged the booklet and nodded obediently. Apparently, Elder Du and Yu had already heard about her reputation for slacking off in the outer sect. He even warned her that he'd check on her progress in 3 days, and anyone who couldn't keep up should be ready to get kicked by him. The mention of kicking got Yi Qiao curious. What kind of kick are we talking about here, she thought. But just then, Elder Du and Yu's gaze shifted to Mu Chongxi, who was still lingering nearby. Annoyed, he raised his foot and delivered a hard kick to Mu Chongxi's backside, yelling, why are you still standing around? Get moving. What are you standing around for? Hurry up and train. Mu Chongxi, who'd just been kicked through the air, rubbed his sore backside and grumbled, Elder, can't you talk like a normal person? You don't have to go so hard. Seeing this, Yi Qiao's face turned pale. Sure, she might be lazy sometimes, but she definitely didn't like getting kicked. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Everyone was training hard, and Yi Qiao was already pushing herself to her limit, running as fast as she could. Elder Du and Yu's voice echoed behind her, urging her to go faster. Feeling like she was about to get kicked again, she immediately activated her wind step technique and dodged just in time. At that moment, she finally understood the true purpose of this technique. Learning wind step helped she dodge kicks faster. Mu Chongxi, who was running alongside her, grabbed her and kept urging, don't slack off. We're not done yet. If you don't want to get kicked, just keep up with me. The two of them sprinted forward without daring to stop, with Elder Du and Yu chasing them from behind, making sure they didn't let up. Ming Xian, who was a spirit cultivator and didn't have to go through this kind of training, was lounging around, sipping tea and throwing in some sarcastic comments here and there. He would constantly tease Yi Qiao with things like, "Oh look, the little potatoes here," or "Why are you so short?" or "What, does your family not feed you?" Yi Qiao clenched her teeth, trying to keep calm. She kept telling herself over and over, "If others get mad, I won't get mad." Getting sick from anger helps no one. Ming Xian might be super talented and the type to always have time for schadenfreude, but she was sure of one thing: he was absolutely annoying. Day after day, this became their routine. Then, one day during a class on cultivation techniques, Yi Qiao found herself spacing out again, daydreaming. She couldn't help but think, Elder Du and Yu's training is really paying off. With the help of the wind elemental energy, I actually managed to progress from level 5 of Qi refining to level 9 in just 2 months. Elder Zhao glanced down and immediately noticed Yi Qiao, who was zoning out. Without skipping a beat, he called on her to answer the question he'd just asked. If she couldn't answer it, she'd be stuck cleaning the library later. Yi Qiao stood up nervously. She hadn't been paying attention at all and had no idea what the question was. What does Elder Zhao have against me? She wondered, frustrated that he always picked on her. She glanced at Ming Xian, who was yawning lazily. Thinking fast and determined to save herself, she pointed at her second senior brother and said loudly, "Elder Zhao, Ming Xian said he knows the answer." Elder Zhao looked over at the now dazed Ming Xian and said, "All right then, let's have Ming Xian demonstrate it for the class." Ming Xian's eyes widened as he stared at Yi Qiao, completely stunned by her betrayal. Seeing him stand up, Yi Qiao sighed in relief, giving him an innocent smile. She leaned over and whispered, "Come on, second senior brother, who else is going to take one for the team if not you? You're our Sect shining star, after all. You can handle a little extra work." Yi Qiao's mischievous smile only grew. Senior brothers are meant to be used as shields, she thought. It's not like she was doing this out of pure spite. It was payback for him calling her names like potato and dynamite. Halfway through the lecture, she started feeling drowsy again. Her head drooped as she struggled to stay awake. Ming Xian, noticing this, knew it was his chance. He whispered softly into Yi Qiao's ear, "Little junior sister, class is over." Yi Qiao, who was half asleep, was super sensitive to the words "class is over." She immediately snapped awake, jumping up so fast that she knocked her desk over with a loud bang. Yi Qiao instinctively tried to bolt for the cafeteria, but before she could take off, Ming Xian grabbed her arm. She immediately got a bad feeling. Turning around, she saw Shui Yu and the others all sitting quietly in their seats. Wait a minute. Class wasn't over at all. Elder Zhao narrowed his eyes at her and asked sharply, "Yi Qiao, why did you stand up? Are you that dissatisfied with my teaching that you had to kick over your desk to spice things up?" Seeing her getting scolded, Ming Xian finally cracked a smile. "Justice has been served, junior sister," he teased. But his smugness didn't last long. Elder Zhao pointed at him too and said furiously, "And you? Can't even answer a basic question. Both of you, head to the library to clean up after class." Ming Xian's smile vanished instantly, while Yi Qiao, who had been sulking, suddenly broke into a grin. She taunted, "What goes around comes around, senior brother. Karma's a real thing, huh?" With no good comeback, Ming Xian just dropped his fan and sulked. After class, the two of them headed to the library together, looking like a pair of defeated troublemakers. The librarian glanced at Yi Qiao and sighed, "Back to sweeping again, huh?" Yi Qiao thought to herself, "Ever since I started taking Elder Zhao's cultivation classes, I've been stuck cleaning this place for over 10 days straight. If I can't answer his questions, I'll never get out of this trouble." When they arrived, Ming Xian, who had never done manual labor in his life, refused to lift a finger. Yi Qiao, equally unmotivated, was sweeping half-heartedly. As her broom brushed against his foot, she snapped, "Move it." Mingxian held back his irritation and silently stepped aside, but he could feel his little junior sister's intense gaze on him. To reassert his authority, he cleared his throat and reminded her, "You know, I'm the only alchemist in training in our entire sect." He paused, then added, "And remember, I'm still your second senior brother." Does this brat even know how to respect her seniors? He wondered. Yi Qiao leaned lazily against her broom, sarcastically clapping her hands. "Wow, you're just so amazing," she said with a mocking tone. Mingxian felt the sting of her words and thought she was trying to pick a fight. The two locked eyes, neither one backing down, having a silent standoff through their glares. The librarian, seeing the two of them just wasting time like that, reminded them, "No lunch until the place is spotless." Without missing a beat, Yi Qiao threw her broom aside and flopped down on the ground. "If he's not sweeping, then I'm not sweeping either," she declared. Time crawled by, and about an hour later, neither of them had budged. Finally, Mingxian's stomach let out a loud growl. He couldn't take it anymore. "I'm starving," he admitted. Hearing this, Yi Qiao quickly sat up and chimed in, "Same here." Mingxian cleared his throat and suggested, "How about we just get this over with?" This time, he picked up his broom first, and Yi Qiao, seeing him take the lead, agreed without any fuss. The two of them immediately reached a silent understanding. Brooms in hand, they started sweeping like maniacs, determined to finish up and dash to the cafeteria as soon as possible. They were bouncing around, stirring up so much dust that the librarian, who had been reading quietly, suddenly coughed. When he looked up, he saw the previously lazy duo now darting around like two wild mantises. In no time, they haphazardly swept through 2 whole floors. Without waiting for the librarian's approval, they blurted out that they'd come back to finish up after lunch and bolted towards the cafeteria like they were on wheels, disappearing in an instant. Watching them disappear, the librarian twitched his lips in annoyance. "They're like starving ghosts in a past life. Those two are hopeless," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Then he yelled into the empty space around him, "So this is that promising talent you were talking about? Promising my foot. She's like a reincarnated glutton, that's what she is." At that moment, Elder Duan stepped out from the shadows, clearly having witnessed the whole scene. Stroking his chin, he commented with a smirk, "Yi Qiao has an incredible memory, practically photographic. Even Mu Chongxi, who's notorious for being stubborn, took more than 10 days to master the wind step technique. But Yi Qiao? She got it down in just 3 days. That's why I suggested to Elder Zhao that she should spend more time in the library. With such a talent, it would be a shame to waste it. I thought she'd be reading more while cleaning the place, but nope, she just sweeps and dashes off." The librarian then voiced his doubts. If she's got such a great memory, shouldn't she have aced the outer sect exams? How come her results are always so average? Elder Duan, thinking about Yi Qiao's recent grades, suddenly fell silent, starting to wonder if his judgment might have been off after all. Later that evening, after finishing dinner, the two of them headed back to the library as part of their punishment. By then, it was already dark, and the moon was peeking over the treetops. Yi Qiao, feeling full and energized, exclaimed, "I'm ready to go now that I've eaten." Mingxian glanced at his junior sister, who was yawning as she muttered, "Only 2 more floors to sweep and then we can go to bed." He couldn't help but wonder, are girls this young supposed to eat so much? In his memory, the girls from the inner sect barely ate 2 bites before getting full, but this little junior sister had just wolfed down 5 buns in one sitting. Thinking about sleep seemed to give Yi Qiao a burst of motivation. She grabbed her broom and yelled to her second senior brother, "Let's get started on the 3rd floor." The 3rd floor was packed with neatly arranged records. She casually picked one up and asked, "Where are all these books from?" Mingxian said proudly, "These books have been passed down from our grandmaster's generation. Each one is a unique copy. Only direct disciples can access this library. Outer and inner sect disciples don't even have the privilege to sweep the floors here." Yi Qiao pointed at a page in one of the books, curiosity in her eyes. "So, what's this fire control talisman used for? It looks pretty valuable." Mingxian glanced at the runes on the page, raising an eyebrow. Why's a sword cultivator like you interested in something like this? Without missing a beat, Yi Qiao launched into a well-crafted response. Even though I'm a sword cultivator, I've always had a fascination with talisman techniques, especially after I heard about how amazing second senior brother is at it. Her flattery seemed to work like a charm. Under her admiring gaze, Ming Xian cleared his throat and said, "All right, pay attention. I'll show you how it's done." He then started drawing the talisman. His movements were fast and precise, and it was a good thing Yi Qiao had a great memory, or else she wouldn't have been able to follow his wild strokes. Before long, Ming Xian announced, "This is how you make the fire control talisman." He snapped his fingers, and the talisman burst into flames like a magic trick, instantly heating up the room. As she watched the flame light up at his fingertips, Yi Qiao thought to herself, "This is amazing. Talisman techniques are seriously cool." Yi Qiao clapped enthusiastically, adding to the praise. Ming Xian, caught up in the excitement of his junior sister's compliments, suddenly felt like she might not be so bad after all. "If you want to learn more, I can teach you," he offered. Yi Qiao, being someone who knew how to appreciate an opportunity, immediately thanked him. She thought she had memorized the process to make the fire control talisman, so she picked up a brush and said confidently, "I think I got it. No need to teach me again." Then, she replicated Ming Xian's steps. A faint flame flickered on the talisman paper, so fragile that it looked like it could go out at any second. Ming Xian was stunned. He didn't expect her to succeed on her first try. But as he stared at the tiny flame swirling on the paper, he quickly shouted, "Wait! This spirit fire is alive, it can move on its own." Before Yi Qiao could celebrate, the flame suddenly leapt off the talisman. Ming Xian dodged to the side, but the bookshelf behind him wasn't so lucky. In an instant, the spirit fire flared up like a wildfire, spreading fast. Ming Xian, quick on his feet, summoned a massive water ball and hurled it at the flames, putting them out just in time. The two had barely caught their breath when the furious voice of the librarian roared from behind them. "What are you two doing playing with fire in the library? Have you lost your minds?" he yelled, his face flushed with anger and his mustache bristling. Grabbing them by their collars, he barked, "Or do you have some kind of issue with me? Speak up!" Yi Qiao and Ming Xian were both guilt-ridden, one of them mumbling, "No, we don't," and the other stammering, "We wouldn't dare." The librarian scoffed, so mad he actually laughed. "You wouldn't dare? Then why were you burning things?" The fire had already spread in mere seconds. Over a dozen books had been scorched, some even glued together after being soaked by the water. One glance was enough to know they were completely ruined. Watching the scene before him, the librarian felt his heart ache. Yi Qiao realized just how serious things were. She knew these books were all one of a kind, and seeing the librarian's devastated expression made her conscience twinge with guilt. Yi Qiao hesitated for a moment before asking the elder, "Do you have a memory stone?" She figured that since the books were one of a kind, they must have been recorded with a memory stone. Otherwise, if anything went wrong, it would be a huge loss. The librarian, with tears still wet at the corners of his eyes, heard her question about the memory stone and snapped back, "What do you even need a memory stone for? You can only view it once, and after that, it's useless. Plus, those things are crazy expensive. Do you seriously think you can memorize everything in just one viewing?" Knowing she was at fault, Yi Qiao nervously offered a suggestion. "How about this, if you trust me, give me the memory stones for these books, and I promise I'll copy everything down, word for word." Hearing her promise, the librarian was shocked but remembered that Elder Duan had once mentioned Yi Qiao had an eidetic memory. With no other option, he decided to take a gamble. Seeing how serious Yi Qiao was, the librarian finally pulled out the memory stones and agreed to let her give it a try. With a stern look, he warned Yi Qiao, "Go to the restricted area and start copying. And don't even think about leaving until you're done." He figured this would be the perfect chance to test if the girl truly had a photographic memory. Just as Yi Qiao was about to head off, the librarian caught a glimpse of Ming Xian, who had been trying to sneak away. Knowing full well that he had something to do with the disaster, the librarian called out, "You're going with her." Both of you won't leave until it's finished." Ming Xian, who thought he had narrowly avoided punishment, was now silently cursing himself for not running faster earlier. If only he'd been just a bit quicker, he might have actually gotten away. Up on the main peak, surrounded by spiritual energy, Elder Duan was casually gossiping with his senior disciple, Zhu Xingyun, while sipping tea. He excitedly shared the news that his little junior disciple had caused chaos again, this time, teaming up with Ming Xian to burn down the library. You could hear the excitement and schadenfreude in his tone. Zhu Xingyun thought to himself, the Yi Qiao really can't sit still. She just joined the sect and already left a massive crater in the plaza. Now, as soon as she starts working at Qingchuan, she's burning down the library. Though he kept a calm face while sipping his tea, inside, he was wondering if he'd taken in a junior sister or just a walking disaster. Back to Yi Qiao and Ming Xian, they arrived at the restricted area. Yi Qiao found it to be a beautiful and serene place, full of spiritual energy, not so much a forbidden zone as a perfect spot for training. Noticing her wide-eyed wonder, Ming Xian decided to explain the history of their sect's forbidden zone. He told her that this was the site where their founder had ascended, leaving behind many treasures. Of course, it was also filled with hidden dangers, which is why it was off-limits. Yi Qiao, however, wasn't interested in treasure hunting, she just wanted to finish copying the books. As they walked deeper into the area, they suddenly saw someone standing and facing a wall, looking familiar. When Yi Qiao focused, she realized it was her beloved third senior brother. Shui Yu noticed them approaching and happily waved, then asked what they were doing there. After all, this was the Forbidden Zone, usually a place where minor disciples were punished with wall-facing meditation. How did they even get in here? Yi Qiao saw no reason to hide the truth and admitted that she had burned down the library. Shui Yu paused for a moment, then turned to Ming Xian and asked, "And what about him?" Yi Qiao answered honestly, "He helped me burn it down." Shui Yu clutched his chest in shock, thinking, have my junior brothers and sisters finally lost their minds? After a moment of silence, he asked in disbelief, "Do you two have some grudge against the library?" Yi Qiao shook her head, saying she was just playing with fire and accidentally burned the books. After hearing Yi Qiao's explanation, Shui Yu was even more speechless. Playing with fire? Who in their right mind would go into a library at night to mess around with something like that? After exchanging reasons for their punishments, they learned that Shui Yu was here because he'd made some experimental pills. Turns out, the pills caused his fellow brothers and sisters to laugh uncontrollably to the point where they got poisoned and had to be carried away. Yi Qiao couldn't help but roll her eyes when Shui Yu awkwardly laughed after finishing his story. What kind of chaotic group of misfits were they? Ming Xian sighed, sat on the ground, and fanned himself. The mountain breeze nudged him along, and he reminded Yi Qiao, "Hurry up and get to copying. We can't leave until you're done." Yi Qiao agreed, then took out her brush, ink, and paper, preparing herself. She placed a spirit stone into the memory stone and began replaying what was recorded in it. As pages and pages of books opened up in the spirit stone's world, Yi Qiao focused intensely and memorized every single word. Snapping back to reality, she immediately began copying, her brush flying across the paper. In her rush to finish, her handwriting looked like a bunch of chaotic scribbles, so bad that even her own parents wouldn't be able to recognize it. Shui Yu watched this scene unfold and quietly elbowed Ming Xian. "What's she doing?" he whispered. "She's copying books," Ming Xian explained. She burned a dozen books from the third floor, so she promised the librarian she'd rewrite every single one. Shui Yu's eyes widened in disbelief. Rewrite them all? If she really has the memory to pull that off, what kind of genius is this little junior sister of theirs? As dawn broke, time ticked by slowly. Yi Qiao was completely absorbed, and her writing speed kept increasing. She tapped into the same focus she had back when she was cramming for exams, determined to study to death if she had to. She spent the entire day copying books, her speed leaving the two of them absolutely speechless. She felt dizzy and lightheaded from all the work. Her two senior brothers glanced at what she had copied and couldn't help but think, this handwriting looks like a bunch of scribbles, who could even read this? Just then, Their little junior sister muttered, "I'm so exhausted, I can't do this anymore." And with that, she collapsed backwards onto the ground. Mingxian and Shui Yu watched as she fell, sighing softly. For a moment, they thought they saw a tiny crying ghost slip out of her mouth. Life in the Forbidden Zone was rough, and they were really counting on her to finish copying those books so they could all get out of there. Immediately, the two of them started massaging her shoulders and back, giving her some words of encouragement. Mingxian thought to himself that getting out of here completely depended on their junior sister. Yi Qiao felt a little better after that and said, "All right, fine, help me up. I can still do this." Half an hour later, she threw down her brush, collapsed onto the ground again, and dramatically declared, "I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Just let me die." Her face was pale, her head hurt, and she felt even more drained than before. Shui Yu was super worried and told her that her current condition was due to overusing her spiritual energy and that she needed to hang in there. Whether they could leave or not totally depended on her. Noticing that she had a nosebleed, Shui Yu quickly pulled out some replenishing pills, urging her to take a few so she could keep going. Mingxian, meanwhile, gave an enthusiastic pep talk, insisting that if their junior sister just worked hard enough, they could all live the lives they wanted. But deep down, he was really just thinking, "Hurry up and finish. I want to get out of here." Yi Qiao's hands trembled as she popped the pill into her mouth, thinking sarcastically, "Wow, thanks so much, you two are such great senior brothers." But, to be fair, the pill from her third senior brother actually worked pretty well. In no time, she felt energized again. Shui Yu was shocked and asked, "Junior sister, did you just break through?" Closing her eyes to check her spiritual state, she realized she was at the peak of the Qi refining stage, just one step away from the foundation establishment stage. When she was copying earlier, she had noticed her spiritual Qi expanding, and now she understood it was because she had just broken through. Mingxian felt a bit unreal. Was breaking through really this easy now? After all, reaching the peak of the Qi refining stage usually required at least 3 days of meditation, and breaking through was no small feat. Shui Yu propped his chin and thought she must have broken through by relying on these replenishing pills, just like a talisman master uses talismans to break through. He shared his theory, suggesting, could it be that our junior sister broke through by understanding the runes she's been studying non-stop these past few days? It made sense, considering how she had been obsessively copying those symbols. But Mingxian raised an eyebrow and asked, "Isn't she a sword cultivator?" Shui Yu suddenly remembered something and said, "Have you ever heard of someone who cultivates 2 paths at once? It's super rare, only the most talented can do it. Only the founder of the Changming Sect was the sole dual cultivator, mastering both sword and pill cultivation. But to think our junior sister could be one too, that's kind of hard to believe." Before they could spiral further into wild theories, Yi Qiao patted them on the shoulders and cut them off. "Stop overthinking. It's probably just because there's a lot of spiritual energy here. Now, quit talking, I've got more books to copy." By the time she finished copying all the books, 2 whole days had passed. The librarian looked at the neatly stacked piles of documents next to the 3 of them. He figured Shui Yu and Mingxian didn't really contribute much to the copying, so he let them off the hook and waved them away. Watching her 2 senior brothers quickly turn to leave, Yi Qiao grumbled to herself about how heartless they were, not even waiting for her. Left behind, she had no choice but to follow the librarian to the 3rd floor of the library. There, she noticed the once messy rune scrolls were now organized neatly. The librarian pulled out a few ancient-looking scrolls from somewhere and, handling them carefully, asked her politely, "Little one, how about helping us out with these?" Instantly on high alert, she smartly asked, "What kind of help?" She had a gut feeling it wasn't going to be a good deal, and honestly, she'd rather spend that time sleeping than taking on extra unnecessary work. The elder, thrown off by her attitude, stood silent for a moment before explaining that these scrolls were left behind by the sect's founder for future disciples to study. He added that the scrolls contained ancient pill recipes, and since Yi Qiao had already memorized all the books in the 10-mile radius, these ancient scrolls should be a breeze. Her forehead broke out in a sweat, and she couldn't help but remind the elder that she was human, not a machine. Seriously, if she went through all these ancient scrolls, she'd probably end up completely drained. The librarian pondered for a moment and then asked what she meant. Yi Qiao cut to the chase, saying, "I can do it, but you'll have to pay up. My sleep is precious, after all. I can memorize the books with just a glance, but it's gonna cost you." When the elder was reminded of the sect's financial struggles, his face darkened. Changming sect was so broke that they couldn't even keep the pot boiling. Worried Yi Qiao might refuse, the elder reluctantly offered her a bottle of pills as payment. Yi Qiao's smile vanished, and with a wave of her hand, she said, "Forget it. I'll just slack off. Seriously, I hate reading more than anything." "Well, unless the money's good, of course." Just as she was about to leave, the librarian quickly patted her shoulder, looking flustered. Wait. I'll throw in 2 more bottles of pills, 3 total." Yi Qiao stretched lazily, yawned, and replied in a bored tone, "Nah, with this much time, I might as well take another nap." The librarian, realizing that this little troublemaker wouldn't cave without something more valuable, gritted his teeth. "Come back. If you can copy all these ancient texts without a single mistake, you can take your pick from the special grade pills." Hearing this, Yi Qiao flashed a bright smile. "Deal." As Yi Qiao got her hands on the ancient scrolls, she placed her spirit stone into them, and the world started spinning. When she opened her eyes again, everything looked unfamiliar. "So, this is inside the ancient scroll, hey?" she muttered. The setup looked similar to the current library, but far less fancy. She walked closer and saw an old man making pills, muttering non-stop. "With only bitterwood, ghost flower, and some dogbane, you think you can make pills? Ha! When I've got money, I'm going back to raise pigs." Watching this scene, Yi Qiao thought to herself, the ancestor of Changming sect really had some wild ideas. If I could, I'd probably raise pigs too. Though the old man complained the whole time, his hands never stopped. He refined the pill, controlled the fire, and expertly selected the herbs. Everything flowed smoothly until he performed some intricate hand seals, and a golden pill imprint floated into the furnace. Yi Qiao closely observed each step, carefully memorizing the hand seals before snapping out of the vision. She immediately started writing down everything she'd seen. The librarian, watching her scribble away, couldn't help but think, this rebellious girl actually has some skills. The entire library was silent except for the sound of her brush. Soon enough, Yi Qiao finished, but her nose was bleeding. Wiping it with one hand and holding out the other, she asked the librarian for the key to the pill room. The librarian handed over a key, noticing her pale face. "You should go rest soon," the librarian said, a bit concerned. She slowly dragged herself out of the library. As soon as she was out of the librarian's sight, she popped a recovery pill given to her by Shui Yu. She didn't head to the pill room right away. Despite all the ancient texts she'd read, she still only had a basic understanding of pill making. But that wasn't a problem, she could always ask her third senior brother for help. Shui Yu had already gone to bed when he heard someone knocking on his door. He opened it and jumped in surprise when he saw a shadowy figure. It turned out to be his junior sister, who excitedly waved the key to the pill pavilion in his face. "Third senior brother, let's go to the pill peak. The librarian gave me the key to the pill room as a thank you for copying the scrolls. He said I could take whatever I wanted." She beamed, inviting him along to help her pick out the best stuff. Shui Yu couldn't believe it. The librarian was notorious for being stingy, so this was a rare opportunity. Knowing how lucky they were, he quickly agreed to help her take full advantage of the situation. The two of them hurried over to the pill room, picking out only the most valuable items. Yi Qiao ended up with bags full of treasures and kept showering Shui Yu with compliments for being such a big help. They left the pill peak in high spirits, but the pill peak master wasn't as thrilled. He could only watch helplessly as these two troublemakers not only took the rarest pills but also swiped some precious herbs from the garden. If they weren't direct disciples, he would have kicked them out on the spot. After helping her pick out the pills, Shui Yu walked Yi Qiao back to her room. For some reason, the moment he stepped inside, he noticed that the spiritual energy in her room was abnormally thick, almost as strong as in the Silent Emperor's chamber. Since he wasn't a spiritual cultivator, he chalked it up to her good luck in getting such a prime spot. He earnestly advised her to take advantage of the amazing conditions to train harder, especially since the sect's big competition was only 6 months away.